Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the story of David and Goliath. But in order to understand what really happened, we have to rewind a little bit. So we're going to go way back to the book of Exodus. So we know that the Israelites are God's chosen people, and they were slaves in Egypt, and Moses came along and he freed them. Once he freed them, they made some bad decisions and they ended up not getting to the promised land with Moses. So after Moses, we had Joshua who came and took over as their leader, and he's the one who brought them into the promised land. But once they got there were people living there already. So they had to deal with all those people in order to have the land that God promised them. Along the way, they decided that they didn't want God to be their ruler anymore. They wanted a king. And God was a little bit upset about it, but he was like, you know what? I'm going to give the people what they want. So he decided to make a man named Saul the king. He was a great guy, a good option at the time, but over time he started to make some bad decisions, and God was like, he is not it. So I need to pick a new person. So God ends up telling Samuel, who's the priest at that time, to go to this guy named Jesse's house. Jesse has 8 sons. So he goes to Jesse's house, and Jesse brings his sons out, but David is still outside. Jesse didn't bring him in because David was the youngest. He was still a little boy at the time. So he's still outside. He's hanging out with the sheep, looking out for them and stuff. And so Samuel looks at all of Jesse's sons, and he's like, none of them are it. And he was like, do you have another son? So Jesse's like, well, I mean, I do, but he's the youngest one. I'm pretty sure he's not going to be the king. So they bring him in, and God speaks to Samuel, and he's like, that's my boy. That's who I want to be the king. So everybody's like, what? David is like, me? I'm a little kid. How am I going to be a king? So he ends up becoming chosen as the king. He is not made the king yet. So at this time, Saul is still in charge, but God is with David now. God chose David as the person who's going to be the next king. So now we get to 1 Samuel 17, which is the book that we're going to be reading from today. And we start with these people called the Philistines. They don't believe in God, and they're at war against the Israelites, who we know are God's chosen people, right? They're the people that came out of slavery in Egypt. So they're at war, and picture you have like one hill right here, and then like a little valley area, and then another hill right here. So we have the Israelites and we have the Philistines. So every day they come down from their hill and they meet in the middle, right? And so they have this guy named Goliath. He's super tall. Like if he came to your house and he stood up, his head would hit the ceiling. That's how tall he was. And most people weren't really that tall at that time. So he comes out, he's this huge, huge guy, and everybody is like, oh my goodness, how are we supposed to fight him? So he comes out with his helmet on, and he has a coat of armor on to protect his body. He has on these have you ever seen people when they play soccer and they have like the things on their legs that protect their shins? So he's wearing those to protect his legs, and he has his weapons and a shield. So on top of the fact that he's bigger than everybody else, he has all of these things protecting him, right? So everybody's like, there's no way we could beat this guy. So he comes out, they meet in this little valley every day, and Goliath is like, what up, Israelites? Who's trying to fight? Anybody? And they're all like, no, not me. Not it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to fight you. And even King Saul, he's like, nah, fam. It's not my calling. Can't do it. I'm afraid. And they do this back and forth for 40 days. They'll come down the hill, they'll meet in the valley. Goliath will be like, what up? And they'll be like, not us fighting. And then they go back to their hills, right? So one day, Jesse, remember David's dad, he's like, hey, David, I want you to go check on your brothers, because he has 3 older brothers that are at war. So he's like, okay, I'll go check on them. So he packs up some food, just because they got to eat. They're at war, right? Well, they're not really fighting, but they're away. So they need to eat. So David takes them some grain, some bread, and some cheese. And he goes out there, and as he's getting there, they're all lining up in this valley so that Goliath can do his thing, and then they can all run away again. So David sees this happen. And now remember, he was chosen to be the next king. So God is with him at this point. God isn't with Saul anymore. So David sees this happen, and he's like, nobody's going to fight him? Y'all just going to let him talk crap to you like that? And everybody's like, we don't want to go there. We don't want to do that. So David is like, well, what's going to happen then? And they're like, well, all the people in the army, they're like, well, I mean, the king said that whoever kills Goliath will get a lot of money, they'll get a wife, and they won't have to pay taxes anymore on anything, and neither will their family, so they get discounts on everything they buy. And David is like, I don't even care about all that. He's talking about God. Like, we need to stand up because we're God's people. And so David is already thinking different than everybody else. Like, he's thinking with a mind that is focused on God versus a mind that's focused on, like, you know what, let me get this money. Like, he doesn't care about the money. He's upset that people that Goliath and the other people in his army are talking about God. Like, that really upset him. So he's like, we need to do something. And so his older brother, he overhears David talking about all this stuff. And he comes out and he gets mad and he's like, bro, who do you think you are? Like, we're in the army. You're not. You're just out here because you want to see us fight. Don't instigate this. Like, we can't beat him. So David starts talking to other people in the army. He's like, you know what? Okay, whatever you say, bro. And he starts talking to different people. And he's like, well, I'll fight him. What's up? Now, keep in mind, he's a kid still. He's very young. He's not in the army or anything. He takes care of sheep in the fields at his dad's house still. So he's like, I'll fight him. What's up? I'm not scared of Goliath. So the other soldiers they're like, bro, do you hear this? Like, this little kid is coming out here. He's ready to fight. And they get that information back to Saul, the king. So Saul is like, tell him to come here. Let me talk to him. So he gets to Saul. They have this meeting, and David is like, I'll do it. I'm not scared. What's he going to do to me? Nothing. And David is like, Saul is like, David, you're a kid. You're a little boy. You can't do this. That man is a giant. He's taller than us when we stand up in our houses. So he hits his head. Like, he has to duck when he comes inside. We don't have to do that. He's way bigger than us. He's been doing this his whole life. You're a little boy. You work in the fields playing with sheep. And David is like, first of all, I don't play with sheep, okay? Let me tell you what I do every day. So he goes into this whole story, and he's like, don't you know that bears and lions eat sheep? And if I'm supposed to take care of the sheep, then I have to protect them from these lions and these bears. So when these lions and bears come up and try to kill my sheep, I have to fight them off. I grab them by their hair, and I throw them off, and I kill them. And if I can do that to these bears and these lions, I can get him, because he doesn't have teeth. He can't bite me or anything. I'm used to fighting. I might not fight people, but I fight animals. And David is like, keep dressing that up. And Saul is like, okay, if you think you can fight him, God be with you. And David is like, he will be. So since he's going to go fight, Saul is like, well, let me at least try to protect you. Let me give you my gear. So, you know how I told you how Goliath had like the armor and the shield and everything else? So Saul is like, David, let me give you my stuff. That way, at least I can feel better and say that I tried to help you out. And he puts it all on. David puts all the stuff on. But remember, he's young. He's not a full-grown man. And he's putting on a full-grown man's armor. So it's too big for him. He's struggling to walk around. So picture like if you had to put on your parents' work clothes. They're going to be way too big for you. The sleeves are going to be too long. The pants are going to be too long. You'll be tripping all over the place. You can't wear their shoes either. Their shoes are too big. You won't be able to walk. And David can't go into a battle like that. Like, he can't even walk right, let alone actually fight. So he's like, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks. I can't wear this stuff. So he takes all of it off. And the only thing he takes with him is his slingshot. And he goes to a stream and he gets 5 stones. And he puts them in his little pouch. So he just goes the way he normally goes to work. He just puts on his little coat and he takes his slingshot and his stones. And he goes out to meet Goliath the next time they come out. So they're on their separate hills. They come down. Goliath is out there and he's like, who's going to fight me? And David, he walks out and he's like, I will. What's up? And Goliath is like, are you kidding me? You're a little kid. You're coming out here with toys, a slingshot? You can't beat me. And David is like, want to bet? Because guess what? God is with me and he's not with you because you don't even believe in him. And Goliath is like, your God can't do anything. And David is like, oh, for real? So they're going back and forth. And then Goliath just gets really angry and he's like, you know what? Let me just kill this little boy. So they start running after each other. And as they're running towards each other on the battlefield, David pulls out his slingshot and he gets one of his stones and he pulls it out and he lets it go and it hits Goliath right in his forehead and it kills him. David doesn't even have to touch him. So all the Philistines in the army with Goliath, they're all like, oh, snap, it's about to go down. So they take off running. They get scared. And all of the Israelites are like, what just happened? But let's go get him real quick because we need to win this war. So that story really happened. And there's a lot that we can learn from it. And the first thing that I want you to learn is that you are important. If we go back to the beginning when I first started talking, I told you how David's dad, Jesse, didn't even bring him out to meet Samuel in the first place because he didn't think that he was important enough to be seen just because he was young. But he ended up being chosen as the next king. He wasn't king yet, but he was going to be. And then he ended up going to meet his brothers and he won this battle against Goliath. And he was young. He was small. So I want you to know that just because you're young doesn't mean that you can't do something big like David did. And just because you might feel like you're not important sometimes doesn't mean that you're not. Because even when other people don't see you, just like other people didn't see David, God still sees you, just like he saw David. Okay, so another thing we can learn from it is to trust God, okay, all the time because he is fighting for us. He's fighting for you. So if we look back in our story, David trusted that God was going to fight this battle for him. So he didn't take any extra armor. He didn't take people with him. He went into the battle with just himself and God, and he won. Because he trusted him, unlike an entire army who thought that they wouldn't be able to win because they didn't trust God. So remember, you're important. Remember that no matter how young or old or big or small you are, you can do big things just like David. Remember that God is fighting for you. And the last thing I want you to remember is to always be yourself, no matter what. Remember, David was offered Saul's armor. He couldn't fight in it. That wasn't him. That wasn't what he normally did. And he would have never won wearing all those things. He had to go into battle as himself. And when he did, he won. So those are the 4 things I want you to remember.